The nobleman that approached him earlier scoffed at his suggestion and proceeded to equip his sword and shield. "Sounds like we have some guests to entertain," he laughed, encouraging his fellow nobles. They laughed along with him and also began readying their weapons. With everyone else looking forward to the approaching wave of monsters, the only person that didn't look joyful was the noble girl that fired the spell. She shakily looked at Han, who glanced at her and gave her a smile. Seeing his smile, she took a step back, away from the thunderous noise. "Where are Necklace and Elasia currently?" he asked Brittany. Brittany looked preoccupied for several moments and answered, "They are now on their way to our location. A Necklace informed me that they will be at our current location in a few minutes." I suppose if they are already on their way here, there is no reason to tell them not to come. Though Han didn't need the sisters to help, it felt nice to have such considerate creations who worried about him. "Since they are coming, I guess this means that we should play around with these monsters for a bit." He thought out loud. "Brittany, I want you to hold off the wave of monsters. Restrain yourself a bit to let a couple monsters through. People tend to appreciate the effort of others if they experience how difficult the task is," he ordered her, musing about some things. With a flash of light, Brittany equipped her armor and created 2 large broadswords. Walking to the front of the vanguard, she stood ready to take on the horde of monsters. The other students stared at her, not sure what she was planning. Many of them looked bewildered at how she was able to wield such heavy-looking swords on top of the weight of her armor. From the darkness emerged a wave of creatures running towards them, some of them on the floor, ceiling, and walls. The only place that was free of monsters was the center of the tunnel, making it look like a giant worm was rushing towards them. Han walked a little to the side to give himself a clear line of sight and patiently waited for them to get closer. A couple of the students, realizing what they were facing, began their chants and forming their mana into offensive spells. When they were finished, each of them fired various spells of different elements. Most of them were bolts of fire, ice, wind, and water. Though the attacks would look impressive to students, they looked pitifully inadequate for the oncoming swarm. The few spells that successfully landed on a monster were shrugged off, doing no damage to the monsters. It was like shooting a gun at an oncoming train. The difference in force was too great to bridge. "Fighters, line up in the front and prepare to receive the monster's charge. Those who have both fighting and magic skills, all of you need to be in the middle and protect the mages. Mages, line up in the back and start forming your spells and fire them. We are proud students of the top academy, so there is no need to be afraid," the eager noble yelled out, rallying the students. Pointing at a team, he yelled, "Go back to the primary force and alert them of the situation. We will need them to send reinforcements." Accepting their mission, the team ran back to the junction. Han was pretty impressed at how the noble was taking charge. "I guess nobles are useful in some areas," he murmured. "There is no way that they will be able to withstand the first attack, so let me give them a fighting chance," Han said out loud, chuckling. Lifting his hand and pointing it ahead of him, he whispered, "Incinerate." Streaks of flames flew down the tunnel, quickly turning everything in its path into ash. The flames were so intense that streaks of melted rock were left behind, replacing the relaxing bluish hue with a fiery light. Not seeming to care about the loss of their comrades, the monsters continued to rush forward. Cupping his hands together, Han imagined a flow of liquid lightning being formed into a ball. Sparks spat out from the globe of raw energy and he poured more power into it. When it got to a sufficient size, he compressed it to the size of a marble. The energy resonated out of the marble, with Han being able to feel a force pushing him back. Closing his hand over the marble, making a fist, he made the motion of throwing a punch, and when his arm was fully extended, Han opened his fist. Shooting out, the marble flew down the center of the tunnel. As the spear of raw power reached the monsters, he pulled back his hand and made a clenching motion. With an intense light, the globe released hundreds of tendrils of lightning, charring everything the tendril touched. The globe flew down the center as it lay waste to everything it touched. Aside from monsters that weren't killed, there was the smell of ozone in the air, the kind that smelled after an intense thunderstorm. With 2 large area effect spells set into the charging monsters, the number of them drastically diminished. All of the students stared at him in amazement with how strong his attacks were compared to the other mages. Seeing them staring at him, Han made a gesture towards the remaining monsters to remind them to not lose focus. The first person to engage the monsters was Brittany. Just as the monsters were leaping towards her, both of her broadswords were covered in large flames. As smooth as a hot knife slides through butter, the blades of one of her swords glided through the monster. Both halves of the creature continued to fly past before landing on the ground and sliding to a stop. Slashing her blade upwards, a streak of flames cut into tens of monsters. Crouching to the ground, Brittany's legs propelled her forward into the swarm. With mechanical precision, monsters were sliced apart. The air was filled with charred smell of grilled meat, causing several of the students to throw up onto the ground. Watching Brittany, they saw as she flew from one area to another, swinging her massive blades and causing streaks of fire as if a giant animal was clawing the ground and leaving tracks. With some of the monsters heading towards them, the fighters were ready to meet the monsters that slipped past Brittany. Celestra thought that she could show off her magic to her classmates. Listening to that boy, E, talk about them needing to retreat made her annoyed. She thought it was ridiculous that someone wearing a white uniform would say something so cowardly. When she had unleashed her strongest spell, Bolt of Hell Flames, she basked in the thunderous applause from the commoners. This is why peasants are useless, and we nobles had to clean up their mess. Celestia thought to herself, disgusted by such incompetent people being in her class. Since birth, she was raised to be a strong member of the House of Ignalis. Her father would hire mages to come and teach her how to boost her fire magic abilities. With her abilities, she was considered to have the greatest potential as a fire mage in the history of her house. When she arrived at the academy and went through the examination process, she learned that her abilities landed her in the lower B rank. For someone her age to reach such a high level was extremely impressive. Her servants had showered her with praise, and she sent off a letter to her family to give them the good news. In this class trip, she was going to further demonstrate how great she was and increase her house's prestige and power. Celestra's father was a duke within the kingdom, so they received many favors from other houses. Considering that she was the third daughter, the pressure to perform better than her 2 older sisters was great. Becoming a duchess wouldn't be possible, but if she performed well, the title of baroness would be within reach. At the academy, those not meant to inherit titles would need to gain connections to improve their social and political status. Given the opportunity to enter as part of the secondary force would help her gain valuable experience and recognition. The force was meant to have many monsters, but they didn't run into any. Without killing monsters, it wouldn't matter where they went because no one would care. Splitting off from the main group and going to kill monsters would let her have the most kills. With her fire skills, killing off monsters was nothing to worry about. When she heard the rumbling noise, Celestia thought that it was just the clapping and cheering from her fans. It wasn't until the noise was getting louder than her classmates that she realized that something was horribly wrong. The noise sounded like a distant storm heading their way. When the boy E suggested that they run, she understood what was coming towards them. E had said he sensed a large number of monsters and that they should go back, but being arrogant, they didn't heed his advice. The sounds of thousands of feet rushing towards them were getting louder and seemed to drill into her mind. As it got louder, it felt like she was getting closer to death. Glancing over at E to see if he knew what they should do, he only smiled at her as if telling her to prepare for her own death. Stepping back, the thought of running back to the primary force crossed her mind. The teacher was an A-rank adventurer, so surely she would be able to protect them. Though there were only one of her and thousands of monsters, it was unlikely that a single person would be able to hold off against such a force. Her whole body started to tremble in fear. It wasn't until she felt a warm sensation on her legs did she realize how terrified she was. Out of nowhere, fire streaks tore through the monsters and left behind molten rocks. Instead of the comforting blue glow from the walls, the tunnel turned into an inferno with the red glow flooding the tunnel. Even from where she was, Celestia could feel the radiating heat. Frantically, she looked around to see who had created such a strong spell. Her classmates were also looking around to find the culprit. While she searched, an intense bluish-white light suddenly appeared. Looking at her hair, she could see the tip sticking out and an invisible force pushing her back. Turning her head, she saw that E had a bright blue ball in his hands. It seemed to be made out of pure lightning, letting off crackling noises and a high whining sound. She couldn't stare directly at the ball because of how bright it was. Watching as E pulled his hand back, she wondered what he was planning on doing with that. Pushing his fist forward, there was a loud crack as a tiny ball flew towards the monsters. Then that small orb exploded, and tendrils of lightning radiated out, incinerating everything it touched. The air had a weird smell to it after the globe exploded. Her eyes opened wide as she tried to figure out how such a young-looking boy had such power. Not even her father was as strong as he was. Did it mean that his uniform truly reflected his abilities? These thoughts raced through her mind. Suddenly, she felt the dirt on her legs, and turning her head, she realized that her legs had given out. "What are we doing here?" she said out loud. Tears started to stream down her face as she understood how serious of a situation this was. "We are going to all die here," she whispered. Thinking back to her childhood, Celestia wondered what the point of all the training she went through was. Did she miss out on her childhood just to die in some hole in the ground? Drowning in her despair, Celestia saw a creature running on all fours, several times bigger than her dog with insect wings on its back. Everything seemed to slow down, so she was able to see the 4 green eyes that stared back at her with cold apathy. The dirt being flung back by the force of its claws as it rushed towards her. As it opened its massive jaw, she thought about how she wanted to meet a wonderful guy and have a happy wedding like her eldest sister. She remembered watching them dance during the wedding, her sister's face having such a large smile and looking happy. From out of nowhere, a sword swung downwards and lopped off the monster's head. The head flew away, and the body slid several feet on the ground. Not understanding what was happening, she could only stare at the body of the headless creature. "Are you alright?" a voice asked her. Looking up, she saw that E holding out an arm to help her back up. "How?" was all that she could say. I could not let such a stunning woman be eaten by a monster, now could I? He spoke, grinning at her. In the background, Celestra could hear the sounds of people screaming and the flashes of spells being cast. In her chest, she could feel the pumping of her heart. Taking E's hand, she got back on her feet but fell into E's chest. His arm wrapped around her shoulder and he held her as she rested her hand on his chest. "I am scared. I do not want to die," she whispered, her tears starting back up again. The drops fell on his uniform. "I will protect you," E assured her, his breath hitting the top of her hair. While she wondered how he was going to protect her in this nightmare, she heard him quietly say, "Feel the power of absolute zero." Looking up at him, and then towards the monster, Celestra felt a sudden chill, and the remaining monsters stopped in their tracks. They seemed to glitter like diamonds before they began to crumble. A mist of ice crystals was left behind, where all the monsters used to be. In the crystal fog, all she could hear was the groaning of her classmates that were injured during the attack. There were a couple of students that lay on the ground, not moving. When she realized that they were dead, she brought her hand to her mouth. She tried to keep back the feelings of grief that seemed to want to bubble out of her. Looking up at E, she could feel her lips trembling as a wail fought its way out. E looked down at her, seeing her streaks of tears on her face and her trembling lips. She imagined that he probably thought that she was an ugly and arrogant looking woman. This was all her fault. If she didn't try to show off to her classmates, many of them would still be alive. As she stared into E's eyes, she wanted to know if he knew how horrible and monstrous she was. While thinking about these things, she saw his head lowering towards hers and his eyes closing. The feeling of his lips on hers drowned away all other thoughts from her mind. Thoughts of the world around them fell away as she kissed him back.
Don't let this go to waste.